Back to Brexit. The government's Brexit subcommittee is meeting in Westminster to discuss the UK's negotiating stance for the next round of Brexit talks. It comes after a leaked document suggested that the EU wants to reserve the right to restrict the UK's access to the single market during the transition period without reference to the courts. Let's go live to Strasbourg and speak to the leader of the Conservative group in the European Parliament, that's Ashley Fox, and the deputy leader of Labour MEPs, that is Seb Dance. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to both of you. Just to begin with and briefly, to give us a sense of context and where you're coming from in all this, Ashley, in terms of Conservative MEPs, what proportion of them would we consider to be leavers?
I think we all support the Prime Minister's approach now of implementing the referendum result.
How many of you were leavers?
We had a manifesto. If you allow me to answer the question, our manifesto in 2015 said we'd hold a referendum and we would implement the result, and that's what we're doing. We're implementing the result. OK. Well,
I'm sorry for interrupting you. I'll give you an opportunity to answer the question. How many Conservative MEPs were leavers?
I think 7 of my colleagues voted to leave at the referendum.
OK, that's pretty clear. Seb, what about Labour?
All 20 of us voted to remain.
OK. Just trying to get a sense of context where you're coming from, because, Ashley Fox, there is a perception, rightly or wrongly, in the UK that sometimes MEPs of whatever political stripe and colour can go to Strasbourg, can go to Brussels, and they become captured by the system. They can become captured by the project. And they look, for instance, at tweets from former Belgian Prime Minister Guy Verhofstadt, who, of course, is now your front man, your point man for the European Parliament on Brexit, who tweeted not very long ago, thumbs up to a United States of Europe. So they see somebody there who isn't necessarily an honest broker in the way that some Eurosceptics would want to see. Is that how you see him?
Well, he's certainly not my point man, and no Conservative MEPs want a United States of Europe. But I just want to come back to this issue of you asking how many are leavers. All Conservative MEPs are now committed to implementing the result of the referendum. And I think it would be helpful if you stopped talking in terms of how people voted 18 months ago.
OK, but it's still... Do you understand... I mean, Sam, I'll come back to you in a second, but do you understand why it's relevant in the context? I mean, you say you're all now foursquare behind the Prime Minister, but we spend a lot of time debating in the newspapers, on television over here, what kind of Brexit we want. Is it a soft Brexit? Does it involve staying in a customs union, the customs union, etc., etc.? So how people voted 18 months ago, as you say, may have a bearing on how they feel the kind of Brexit deal they want to secure in the future might look like. It's a relevant question.
Well, I think in the Lancaster House speech, in her speech in Florence, the Prime Minister has set out what she wants to achieve. We are going to leave the single market, we are going to leave the customs union, and we will retake control of our borders, our laws and our money. And having achieved that, we want the closest possible free trade agreement with Europe. So I think we're fairly clear about what we're asking for.
Seb Dance, you were shaking your head. Ashley Fox says it's a clear position, the Conservative one. There are critics of the Labour Party who say your position, your leadership's position, is confused on this.
Well, it's a clear position in words. I mean, you can say we're going to take back control of our laws and our borders and our money and all the rest of it. It sounds great, doesn't it? But the reality, of course, is that not just in the Phase 1 agreement that was agreed at the end of last year, but actually in terms of where we're heading on this, we're not going to be taking back control. In fact, certainly not during the transition period, of course, because this place will still be making all of the rules that decide how our businesses export, how our economy operates, and we won't be here. The commissioners won't have a British representative. We'll have no British judge on the European Court of Justice. We'll have no ministers going to the Council of Ministers. It's absurd.
Given that, Seb Dance, would you like to see the transition period to be much more open-ended? Richard Corbett, your MEP Labour colleague, has suggested it ought to be. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think certainly the longer the period of stability we have, obviously, the better. And what we have at the moment is uncertainty for businesses. We have uncertainty in terms of investors who want to put their money into the UK and aren't sure what the situation post-transition or even pre-transition, because I suppose we're still in the negotiation period for the transition. They don't know what the future will look like. So the longer we have stability, absolutely. But back to the core point about what we're trying to achieve here, the position that we have as Labour MEPs is that what the government is trying to do, it's defending it's positioned by saying this is what the voters voted for. But of course, what the voters voted for cannot be delivered through the programme that the government is delivering. We would see a retraction in the economy. We would see businesses leave the UK. We would see investment fall. This is not what people voted for. But it is happening, actually. It is happening.
Unemployment at a 40-year low,
and that's
economy
not
continuing
what people
to grow.
voted for. I'm sorry, but you know what the future indices are like. You know what the investment figures are like. It's all very well saying that the economy hasn't fallen off a cliff because, you know, guess what? We're still in the EU.
You seem to want a permanent transition period and we never leave. And that's not what the people voted for.
Actually, people like me are advocating that we shouldn't leave the European Union because democracy did not end on the 23rd of June.
Seb Dance, you do accept
now
Seb Dance,
is the revelation of what the reality of leaving looks like.
Seb Dance, you accept, though, don't you, that some of those projections, the Project Fear projections, suggesting, for instance, Treasury figures, 500,000 job losses, not in the wake of Brexit, on the wake of a vote for leave, that's not materialised?
Well, you'd have to talk to the former Tory Chancellor of the Exchequer for some of those forecasts. But certainly when it comes to the indices that we're looking at in terms of investors... What's that, sorry?
He's busy putting a newspaper to bed as we speak.
Is he putting it? Well, yes, I think he's got a very strong editorial. I mean, I've been a strong critic, obviously, of George Osborne over the years, but his editorial today is spot on, that we need to stay in the customs union in order to preserve our manufacturing base. I mean, that is self-evident, but as you will hear from Mr. Fox, that's not the Tory policy.
Ashley Fox, you were keen to interject a while ago. Here's your opportunity. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, it seems that the Labour Party are intent on us having a permanent transition period from which we never leave the EU, and you have members like Seb Dance and others who are actively campaigning to overturn the referendum result. And I come back, it's not democracy at all. We said, the Conservative Party said, we would hold a referendum, we would implement the result, whatever it is, and that is what we are getting on with doing, and we will deliver that. And we will leave the EU on the 29th of March 2019.
Come what may, even if it's a disaster.
It's not going to be a disaster.
Because it's going really well.
Ashley Fox, it's a question for both of you, really. How concerned, if concerned at all, you are, Ashley Fox, with the negotiations taking a turn for the antagonistic? And I began this with our introduction, making the point that we've got this transitional arrangement. There's a leaked footnote suggesting that effectively the UK would be punished in certain ways if we behaved in bad faith. Does that set a tone of distrust and bad faith and eventually leads to things turning much more antagonistic than they currently are?
I think this is the normal course of negotiations. I mean, you will remember when we were negotiating the exit agreement, when we were discussing citizens, the EU said you won't be able to register EU citizens. Well, guess what? They will register. They said the system would be overseen by the European Commission. No, it's not. It's the Home Office. They said it would be controlled by the European Court of Justice. No, it isn't. It's British courts with the ability to refer for a limited eight-year period. So you look at the starting position of the EU. We know what they're going to say. They're going to ask for a lot more than they'll get. There'll be a tough negotiation. There'll be a sensible compromise. And I have a feeling at the end of this, we'll have an exit agreement, we'll have an implementation period, and it'll be OK.
So do you think we'll have a say over things during that implementation period?
Seb Dance,
I have no idea, Seb. I mean, that is going to be a subject...
Yeah. No, I'm going to try and keep control of this interview. When our guests start interviewing each other, I start feeling slightly redundant. Seb Dance, just the same. No, not at all. Seb Dance, the same question to you I put to Ashley. Is there a danger this becomes antagonistic? Yeah. Does it store up trouble for the future if it does? Because at the end of the day, as everybody's keen to Labour, we are good neighbours. We'll be good neighbours in the future post-Brexit. We mustn't let things become too unnecessarily antagonistic.
No, I mean, nobody wants to be antagonistic at all, of course not. And it's right and proper that the government say we want to keep partnerships strong and all the rest of it, even if it is pursuing policies that, in my view, are the wrong ones. But we have, of course, had a tone set by the government since the very beginning that has been antagonistic, calling people enemies of the people.
No, that wasn't the government.
I'm sorry, that was the Prime Minister. Well, OK, Citizens of Nowhere, basically asking for foreign-born workers to be registered within companies, as announced by the Home Secretary at the Conservative Party conference.
And then quickly renounced.
An appalling series of Well, quickly renounced, but I mean, they said it. I mean, this is the thing we see from this government day after day, is this aggressive tone backing up, whatever the Daily Mail or the Daily Express headline might want to see in it, and then suddenly rowing back, because of course reality means that you can't possibly run a country on that basis.
Well,
so if anything, the tone from the government so far has been.
Ashley Fox did such a convincing eye roll. I had to give him an opportunity to speak. Ashley Fox, go on.
Okay, is that what it takes?
I mean, Seb would like us to believe that what is said in the Daily Mail goes for government policy, and believe it or not, that is not the case. We're in a set of negotiations. They're going to be tough. Both sides are going to square up to each other, but this is just normal. It's normal politics. There'll be huffing and puffing. There'll be a lot more heat than light. But at the end of this, we will deliver Brexit.
But of course, here we have a situation. It's not an equal negotiation. It's not. This is a petition. We're asking for the benefits of the structures.
You are just an eternal pessimist. You want this to fail. You are doing down our country. It'd be really nice if you would try and implement the will of the British people.
This is absurd. I love my country. I don't want to see it become a basket case because of this government.
I'll have the last word and say thank you, Ashley Fox and Seb Dance. Thanks both very much indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.